Today I want to talk about long and short vowels in English and what people really mean when they use those terms. This video started life as part of a longer script about how people try to explain pronunciation in writing, especially online, and how it's quick and easy to learn just a few IPA characters that will often make this kind of communication easier and clearer. For that original video idea, I was going to talk about 4 different strategies that people use for describing sounds in writing. The first of these was adding letters like H and Y after other letters to make combinations like EH, EY and DZ, which might represent, for example, E, A and J. The second thing we might do is to explicitly describe sounds by using other words. So we might say, for example, it's like the A in face. We might also explicitly describe sounds by using adjectives. So someone might say, for example, that it's got a quick E sound. We also might use whole word replacement for syllables. So for example, the 2 syllables of the word basic could be respelled like this to try to show how it's pronounced. My idea was to look at the strengths and weaknesses of each of these and probably come to the conclusion that you can save yourself a lot of trouble just by learning the basics of the IPA, those funny looking letters that linguists use to write down sounds. However, I've decided that the third of these strategies merits a video all to itself, and that the most commonly used and also some of the most problematic adjectives in question are long and short. So this is that video. So description of sounds using adjectives is just one of the strategies that people employ when they try to convey, for example in writing, that one sound is to be used rather than another. So people might talk or write about a hard G or a soft S if they're talking about consonants. But today I'm going to talk about vowels, so you'll read sometimes things like these. It's a long O sound. It's pronounced with a sharp I. The locals say it with a short U. Or you have to say it with a quick E sound. I'm calling these Reddit respellings because it's the kind of thing that you find a lot on forums and social media. Now, description of a sound is okay as long as you know, or at least you agree with your reader on which adjectives to use and what they mean. Linguists describe vowels as being either front, central or back, and either open, mid or close. This corresponds to the 2 axes of the vowel space represented by this diagram, which I promise is not as abstract and scary as it first might seem. It's really just a drawing of your mouth. Before we get to that though, if it sounds a little fussy to you to insist on using only these adjectives and not light or dark or quick, then please consider the equivalent in your own field of expertise or study. If you're a musician, then you know that words like sharp and flat have very specific meanings in that field and can't, or at least shouldn't normally be used to mean something else. If I want to suggest that someone play a note short and staccato, I can't call that sharp, even if I do feel that there's a certain conceptual sharpness to it. This is because the word sharp in music means something else. It means higher in pitch. Likewise, if we want to talk about something being sharp or flat, we mustn't replace those words with, for example, tight and loose or full and empty. There are conventional ways of describing sounds, and if we want to be understood, then we should generally try and stick to the conventions. But why front, back, open, close, etc.? Well, the different points on this chart represent different places in your mouth that your tongue can move to. The point where we find each vowel is the place in the mouth where there is the most stricture, or the narrowest gap, if you like, when pronouncing that vowel. Say cheese for the camera, and you should feel that your tongue is relatively high and forward, so that's a close front vowel. Say ah for the dentist, and you should feel that your tongue is relatively low and back, so that's an open back vowel. If you're practicing this on your own now, then you'll notice that we're sometimes talking about movement within a relatively small area of your mouth, but you should easily be able to feel the difference between the extremes, like ah, e, and oo. Additionally, vowels can be rounded like oo or unrounded like e. Luckily, English doesn't have too many pairs of rounded and unrounded vowels, so if we're only describing the vowels of English, we can probably get away with not worrying about that for the moment. Vowels also might be described in terms of the tenseness of the tongue, tense or lax. If someone uses additional adjectives in an ad hoc or improvised kind of way, like sharp or light or clear or dull or dark, that doesn't really mean anything when describing vowels. There's not much chance that the other person will be able to reliably reproduce the sound that you're describing based on those kinds of words. In fact, you may as well describe the vowel as sounding green or triangular. Another common way that people try to describe vowels is as being short or long. I can understand why people do this. Unfortunately, when they do it, I can't always understand what vowel they're trying to describe. While a vowel in English can be short or long, these terms in English have problems all of their own, and that's what I'd like to deal with today. Firstly, I think it's useful to understand what true vowel length is. Then we'll see how the terms long and short have historically been used to mean something else in the English vowel system. Now, in a sense, any vowel can be pronounced long or short, and in fact lots of consonants can as well. That's to say that you can physically, acoustically produce the sound for a long or a short duration. I can say s or s, f or f, a or a, e or e. These are differences in the true length or quantity of the sound. However, traditional models of the English vowel system tell us that English doesn't have phonemic vowel quantity. That's to say that we don't use the length of the vowel alone to differentiate one sound from another. This is not strictly true in some accents of contemporary English, but it's true enough to work with for now. So in this traditional model, some vowels are always long and some are always short. There are also diphthongs to consider, but we'll leave those aside for the moment. To be completely clear, when I say vowels here, I'm talking about sounds, not letters. English has about 5 vowel letters and about 20 vowel sounds. That's including the diphthongs. So then the vowel sounds traditionally called long are the a in palm, the e in fleece, the o in thought, and the oo in goose, as well as any vowel followed by an r in words like start and north. And we should also add the sound of words like nurse. Notice that I'm modifying my accent a little bit so that you can hear these. Although it's something of a simplification, it's useful to think of these sounds as always being long, so we write them with a length marker like this. The vowels traditionally called short are the a in trap, the I in kit, the o in lot, the u in foot, the e in dress, the in strut, as well as the famous schwa, which is the second vowel sound in the word comma, or the first in the word about. Here you can see them all laid out with the key words to remember which sound is which. So we could, and I have, roughly paired these up as short a and long a, short I and long e, short o and long o, short u and long oo. Notice that in each short-long pairing though, it's not only the length or quantity that differs. The vowels also have a different quality. Your tongue is not in exactly the same place when you say them, which is why they have all of these different symbols. Don't worry, I'm not suggesting that you have to learn all of these. Not so easy to pair up are the E in dress, the in strut, and the schwa sound in comma. Although actually they do pair quite neatly with the of nurse, as its position in the vowel space is right between the three of them. So these short, long vowel pairings, as I've done them here, pretty much work. They could be quite convenient. A and A would be our open vowels, one front, one back. I and E would be our front close vowels in lax and tense versions. O and O are both back vowels, differing in length and also in openness, although not by much in my accent. U and U are close back-ish vowels, differing in length and closeness. The remainder are something of a potpourri of more or less mid-vowels. Going back to our table here though, you can see why for our Reddit respellings, I'm still not quite sure what someone would mean by a short U, as it could be the sound in foot, or it could be the sound in strut. I also see a problem with the letter E. If someone starts talking to me about a long E, do they really mean the sound in nurse? Or are they referring to a diphthong A, or something different, like the vowel in my Scottish term? But as for the other pairings, there is scope for some meaningful applications of the terms short and long. So short A would be trap, long A would be palm or start. Short I would be kit, and long E would be fleece. Short O would be lot or cloth, and long O would be thought or north. But it might also be force, or the sound in goat. You can see how even in my idealised short-long pairings, I'm unable to clearly distinguish between the full set of vowels just by describing them as short or long. But there's an even bigger problem with all of this, and depending on where and when you went to school, you might have been screaming this at the screen for a while. And that's that the terms long and short vowels have historically been used in the teaching of English to refer to something completely different. As neat and tidy a model as I'm able to come up with here, with these convenient short-long pairs of sounds that are really related, we can never really use it because many teachers over many years and generations have taught short-long vowel pairs as having something to do with spelling. It's always our tendency to put the written word before the sound that makes things more difficult. But like it or not, for historical reasons, we often see short-long pairings, not like mine, but like these, where we have cap paired with cape, bed paired with bead, kit paired with kite, dot paired with dote, and cub paired with cube. You will have noticed that these demonstrate the magic E spelling rule that kids learn at school. That's the magic E at the end of words that makes each letter say its name. I think magic E is a fine tool for teaching children to read, but any use of the words short and long to describe these sounds is a bit misleading. These sounds are in no way short and long versions of the same vowel. It's also not right to say that these sounds are completely unrelated to each other, but the reasons for pairing them up like this have more to do with history and spelling conventions than with the sounds themselves. My front A, back A pair works because these are the openest vowels. They differ in front backness, but they're both open. In this system, A and the diphthong A have no such relationship. They're completely different. Or to be more accurate, the relationship between them has to do with historical changes in the way these sounds have been pronounced. The modern pronunciations have nothing to do with each other in terms of their actual sounds. Similarly, if we disregard the spelling, is there any connection at all between E and E? They're both front vowels, but they're quite far apart. One is certainly not a long version of the other. If we take two words like bed and beat, I would argue that it's the e of bed that's longer. I and I, well, the diphthong glides towards the I sound at least. Or at least it does if you have the accent of a 1930s BBC radio broadcaster saying I. Dot and dote is the only one of these pairs that kind of makes sense to me, but that's only because they're both back monophthongs in my accent, o and o. If you, like many people, pronounce them o and o, or even a and o, there's very little reason to consider them to be a short, long pair. At first, when I was preparing this, I thought that a and u being considered a pair made some kind of sense, but once again, they're quite far apart and not really related at all. The fact that their pairing initially seemed logical to me just goes to show how much spelling influences our perception of these sounds. Put it this way, I think that an alien studying spoken human languages, if they'd never seen English written down before, would not think to write these two sounds with the same character. I think that's all I have to say for the moment about long and short vowels. I'm very tempted to make some kind of pun about that being the long and the short of it, but I'll contain myself. I will come back to my original idea for a video about respelling and representing sounds in writing more generally, and why it's good for everyone to know at least some of the IPA characters that we can use to describe English. Please let me know if that's something you'd like to see. In the meantime though, if you take just one thing away from this, it should probably be that yes, English has short and long vowels, but that those terms have been used to mean different things and might not always be the best way to express what you're talking about. If someone writes down that their name is pronounced with a long A, it's really not clear whether they mean the sound in palm or start, or the sound in face. Long O is even worse, as it could be the sound in thought, or the one in north, force, or goat. Remember that depending on the accent, there could be a lot more difference between these sounds than there is when I say them. To solve this problem, we would ideally be using IPA characters, but you can also get the message across with key words, like the A in palm, or the E in dress. Just make sure that it really is the same sound as the one that you're trying to describe. Or, if you're not afraid of getting a tiny bit technical, you can talk about an open E and a close A. Or a front A and a back A. I find these terms quite useful for teaching, and it allows us to talk about vowel sounds in a way that's clear and unambiguous, but without being too much work for the students to learn to understand it. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you very much for your attention. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like. If you'd like to see more of these videos, then feel free to subscribe to the channel, and see you next time.